words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, a veil behind the heart, a lid over the mind, divide us from the divine. Love and devotion rends the veil. In the quietude of the mind, the lid thins and vanishes. Always with our love and blessings, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Words of our Divine Mother, taken from the compilations of the works of our Divine Mother and our Lord Sri Aurobindo in the book Psychic Being by A.S. Dalal, page 60, Contact with the Psychic Being. Question, sweet mother, on the psychic plane, is there a past, present, and future? For this, our Divine Mother says, in the psychic, yes, you have even the consciousness of all the lives you have lived. When you enter into contact with the psychic, you become conscious of all the lives you have lived. It keeps the absolutely living memory of all events in which the psychic took part. Not the whole life, not that one can tell stories to oneself. That first one was a monkey and then later on something a little higher and so on, the caveman. No, not stories like that, but events of former lives in which the psychic participated are preserved. And when one enters into conscious contact with this psychic being, with his psychic being, this can be called up like a sort of cinema. But it has no continuity except in lives in which the psychic is absolutely conscious, active, permanently active, that is, constantly associated with the consciousness. So, naturally, being constantly associated with the consciousness, it consciously remembers everything that has happened in the real life of the person and the memories. When one follows these things, the memories of a psychic being are more and more coordinated and closer to what could be a physical memory if they were one. In any case, of all the intellectual, emotional elements of life and some physical events, when it was possible for this being to manifest in the outer consciousness, then all these moments, the whole set of physical circumstances in which one was, is kept absolutely intact in the consciousness. Our Divine Mother says, and the moment you are in your psychic being, you have that feeling, looking at death without fear, spontaneously, effortlessly. You soar above the physical life, have the sense of immortality. This is the deep experience one can get as soon as you recover the contact with your psychic being. This is truly interesting phenomenon, for it is automatic. The moment you are in contact with your psychic being, you have the feeling of immortality, of having always been and being always eternally. And when that comes and goes, these are life's accidents. They have no importance. It is not the psychic being that suffers for personal reasons. It is the mind, the vital, and the ordinary consciousness of ignorant man. This is because the contact between the outer consciousness and the psychic consciousness is not well established. He in whom contact has been established is very happy, says our Divine Mother. Next question, sweet mother. Does the psychic being always progress? For this, our Divine Mother says, they are in the psychic being two very different kinds of progress. One consisting in its formation, building, and organization. For the psychic starts by being only a kind of a tiny divine spark within the being. And out of this spark will emerge progressively an independent conscious being which has its own action and will. The psychic being at its origin is only a spark of the divine consciousness, and it is through successive lives builds up a conscious individuality. Our Divine Mother says it is a progress similar to that of a growing child. It is a thing in the making. For a long time, in most human beings, the psychic being is in the making. It is not a fully individualized, fully conscious being, master of itself, and it needs rebirths one after another in order to build itself and become fully conscious. But this sort of progress has an end. There comes a time when the being is fully developed, individualized, master of itself and its destiny, when this being or one of these psychic beings has reached that stage, takes birth in a human being, that makes a very great difference. The human being, so to say, is born free. He is not tied to circumstances, to surroundings, to his origin and atavism like the ordinary people. He comes into the world with the purpose of doing something, with a work to carry out, a mission to fulfill. Our Divine Mother says, from this point of view, his progress in growth has come to an end. That is, it is not indispensable for him to take birth again in a body. Till then, rebirth is a necessity, for it is through rebirth that he grows. It is in the physical life and in a physical body that he gradually develops and becomes fully conscious being. But once he is fully formed, he is free in this sense that he can take birth or not at a will. So there is one kind of progress that stops. But if this fully formed wants to become an instrument of work for the divine, instead of retiring to repose in a psychic bliss in its own domain, he chooses to be a worker upon earth to help in the fulfillment of the divine work, then he has a fresh progress to make, a progress in the capacity for work, for organization of his work, and for expression of the divine's will. So, There is a time when thing changes. So long as he remains in the world, so long as he chooses to work for the divine, he will progress. Only if he withdraws into the psychic world and refuses to continue with the divine work or renounces it, can he remain in a static condition outside all progress, because, as I have told you, only upon earth is there progress. Only in the physical world it is not acquired everywhere. In the psychic world, there is a kind of a blissful repose. One remains what one is without any moment, says our Divine Mother. About this progression of the psychic being, our Lord Sri Aurobindo quotes, in this progression of the soul, the psychic entity is still veiled. Even in man, the conscious mental being, by its instruments of life, mind, and body, it is unable to manifest fully, held back from coming to the front, where it can stand out as the master of its nature, obliged to submit to a certain determination by the instruments, to a domination of Purusha by Prakriti. But in man, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo, the psychic part of the personality is able to develop with a much greater rapidity than in the inferior creation, and a time can arrive when the soul entity is close to the point at which it will emerge from behind into the veil, into the open, and become master of its instrumentation in nature. But this will mean that the secret indwelling spirit, the demon, the Godhead within, is on the point of emergence. And when it emerges, it can hardly be doubted that its demand will be, as indeed it already is in the mind itself, when it undergoes the inner psychic influence for a divine and a more spiritual existence, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Next question taken from page 79 in the same series. Sweet Mother, how can one make one's psychic personality grow? For this, our Divine Mother says, it is through all the experiences of life that the psychic personality grows. It is through all the experiences of life that the psychic personality forms, grows, and develops, and finally becomes a complete, conscious, and free being. This process of development goes on tirelessly through innumerable lives, and if one is not conscious of it, it is because one is not conscious of one's psychic being, for that is the indispensable starting point. Our Divine Mother says through interiorization and concentration, one has to enter into the conscious contact with one's psychic being. This psychic being always has an influence on the outer being, but that influence is almost always occult, never seen, nor perceived, nor felt, saw on truly exceptional occasions. Our Divine Mother says, in order to strengthen the contact and aid, if possible, the development of the conscious psychic personality, one should, while concentrating, turn towards it, aspire to know it and feel it, open oneself to receive its influence, and take great care each time that one receives an indication from it to follow it very scrupulously and sincerely. Our Divine Mother says to live in a great aspiration, to take care to become inwardly calm and remain so always as far as possible, to cultivate a perfect sincerity in all activities of one's being. These are the essential conditions for the growth of the psychic being, says our Divine Mother. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says in page 84 about the emergence of the psychic being and says, the psychic, except in a few extraordinary nature, does not get its full chance in the outer consciousness. It needs some kind of yoga or sadhana to come by its own, and it is as it emerges more and more in front that it gets clear of the mixture. That is to say, its presence becomes directly felt not only behind and supporting, but filling the frontal consciousness and no longer dependent or dominated by its instruments, mind, life, vital and body, but dominating them and molding them into luminosity and teaching them their true action. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the soul in itself contacts all possible strength. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the soul in itself contains all possible strength, but most of it held behind the wheel. And it is what comes forward in the nature that makes the difference. Our Lord says, in some people the psychic element is stronger and in others weak. In some people the mind is strong, in others the vital. But by sadhana, the psychic being can be more and more brought forward till it is dominant and governs the rest. Our Lord says, if it were already governing, then the struggles and the difficulties of the mind and vital would not at all be severe. For each man in the light of the psychic would see and feel the truth and more follow it. Our Lord says, the psychic behind the wheel and its consciousness, only a little comes out. When that consciousness is not concealed, when you are aware of your soul, when its feelings and consciousness are yours, then you have got the consciousness of the psychic being. The feelings, the aspirations of the psychic being are all turned towards the truth, right consciousness and the divine. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says the psychic being is always there, but it is not felt because it is covered by the mind, yet and with the vital. When it is no longer covered, then it is said to be awake. When it is awake, it begins to take hold of the rest of the being, to influence it and change it, so that all may become the true expression of the inner soul. It is this change that is called the inner conversion. There can be no conversion without the awakening of the psychic being. When the psychic being awakens, you become conscious of your own soul, says our Lord, and you no longer commit the mistake of identifying yourself with the mental or the vital being. Secondly, when awakened, the psychic being gives the true bhakti for God or for the Guru. The bhakti is quite different from the mental or the vital bhakti. In the mind, one may have admiration or appreciation for the intellectual greatness of man or Guru, but it is merely mental. Of course, there is no harm in having it so. But by itself, it does not open to the whole of the inner being, but it only establishes a mental contact. The vital bhakti demands and imposes its own conditions. It surrenders itself to God but conditionally and says, "You are great, I worship you, now satisfy my desire or my ambition and make me great, make me a great sadhak or a yogi." The unillumined mind also surrenders to the truth but makes its own conditions. Satisfy my judgment, my opinion is the demand that the truth cast itself in the mind's forms. The vital being also insists on the truth to throw itself into its moments of force, the higher force, and pulls it. But the psychic being and its bhakti are not like that. Because it is in direct communication with the divine behind, it is capable of true bhakti. Psychic bhakti does not make any demand, makes no reservation, it is satisfied with its own existence. It knows how to obey the truth in the right way. It gives itself truly to God or to the Guru because it can give itself up truly, therefore, it can receive truly. When the psychic comes to the surface, it feels sad. When the mental or the vital makes a fool of itself, when the mind is playing its game, it says, "I don't want these things. What am I here after all? I am here for the truth and not here for these things." Psychic sadness is again different from mental dissatisfaction or a vital sadness or a physical depression. If the psychic being is strong, it makes itself on the mental, it makes itself felt on the mental, vital, and forces them and compels them to change. In some cases, the psychic being comes to the surface, upsets the mind or the vital, throws everything into disorder. But the mind is stronger. Or if the mind is stronger or the vital being is stronger, then it casts an occasional influence and gradually retires. Lastly, the psychic being refuses to be deceived by appearances. It is not carried away by falsehood. It refuses to be depressed by falsehood, nor does it get exaggerated for the truth. And because it knows the thing behind, it is not deceived by appearances. It immediately feels the force. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, when the psychic being is awakened, throws out all the dross from the emotional being and makes it free from sentimentalism or the lower play of emotionalism, but it does carry in it the dryness of the mind or the exaggeration of the vital feelings. It gives just the touch to each emotion, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo.